Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 181. What in the world is this? The carriage never stopped. Well, there was a good rest in between. According to the original plan, they had decided to switch horses and go all the way to Sichuan without a break. However, the situation had changed when Chung Myung began his teachings in the middle of the journey. Because of this, Libo had to stop the carriage when he was asked to and wait for the Sahyongs of Chung Myung to be beaten up and then load them back into the carriage and resume the journey again. What are they even doing? From Libo's point of view, there was one thing he couldn't understand. Chung Myung was relentlessly beating his own Sahyongs, and the people who were being hit would pass out. After they woke up, they would rush at Chung Myung with poison in their eyes when the time came for the next training. Since when did Mount Hua turn into such a bloody sect? One thing was certain. Mount Hua had fallen, and everyone was talking about it. But if these disciples stayed in Mount Hua and practiced like this, it wouldn't be long before Mount Hua regains its name and fame. Unless they get sick and die before that. Libo looked at the disciples of Mount Hua. It is really strange. Things which would make no sense to anyone were happening. During their 5 days on the road, the disciples of Mount Hua were beaten like dogs in the hands of Chung Myung. No matter how healthy a person was, it was normal for them to have a hard time with their body, which was being beaten up like this. And wasn't this beating from Chung Myung, who was a Taoist? However, they were running much faster now compared to the first day of training. If that was right, then didn't it mean that they were getting stronger? Does that even make sense? Although he couldn't believe it, it was actually happening in the eyes of Libo. And now, I don't even know which one is more amazing. Of course, that didn't change the outcome. Yunjong bit his teeth and moved to the side. Thud. He fell to the ground and trembled. Seeing that, Chung Myung clicked his tongue. Lower body! Lower body! Does it make sense that your lower body hasn't changed despite training all year round? Focus on the lower body! Your lower body, for God's sake! Chung Myung screamed, looking at his fallen Sahyongs. Everyone was on the ground, and Chung Myung clicked his tongue again as he saw that. Everyone here is trying their best. Trying their best? Everyone here is trying their best. They're trying their best. Obviously, after the fight with Chung Myung, their endurance was increasing significantly, and their bodies were getting stronger. This was something that they couldn't deny. But that didn't mean that it didn't hurt. Every time the teachings were finished, immense pain that was hard to endure rushed through their bodies. Cultivate and get your body ready. Chung Myung turned around, and then he hurriedly walked into the thick bushes. Where are you going? Far from here. Why? Jogul, who was watching his back, clenched his fist. I'll break that nose. Yunjong, who was lying down next to him, said weakly. At least say something which makes sense. He'll break our bones. Jogul turned over and panted, looking at the sky. Sahyong. What? It really does make us stronger, right? Of course. Yunjong could feel it. Even with a few days of training, his strength had really increased. And even his sword movements were sharper. Just by butting swords against Chung Myung, they could feel their rise in energy. Of course, Chung Myung was crushing them with his bare hands, so the expression butting swords within him might have sounded a little weird to others. It should be like that. Jogul took a deep breath. It couldn't be denied that this was effective, but this was really a difficult form of training. If we don't get stronger after doing all this, then it will be such a shame. At the same time, when Jogul was trying to retain his will, Baekchun was looking at the back of Chung Myung without taking his eyes off it for a different reason. Sasuk. Why are you staring at him like that? Baekchun just mumbled. And thinking about something, he spoke with a strange expression. Tell me. Yes, Sasuk. Have you ever seen Chung Myung sweat? Huh? What nonsense is this? What do you mean by that? Literally, have you even seen him sweat? What a strange question. Of course we... Yoonjung tilted his head. Haven't? I don't think I've ever seen it, Sahyung. Come to think of it, I don't think I ever saw Chung Myung sweat in the sword team either. Right? Hearing that, Baekchun's expression turned even more strange. But why are you asking this all of a sudden? No, it's nothing. Baekchun shook his head. But soon, his gaze returned to where Chung Myung had been. The back of his hair was entirely wet. That monster, the guy who crossed swords with the elder of Wudang without breaking a sweat, was now exhausted from fighting his Sahyungs. Others would have been proud of this growth, but Baekchun was a cold-hearted person. He knew that their strength wasn't on par with the elder of Wudang. Then, Baekchun bit his lip. His eyes gleamed with a light which was terrifying and kept staring at where Chung Myung had disappeared. Baekchun, who stared for a long time, then said, "Everyone listen." "Yes?" And he spoke with a heavy voice. Chung Myung, who had walked to a place where Sahyungs couldn't see, lay down. Oh my, I'm dying." He could already see the stars in the sky. Cold sweat was dripping down his body, and he was panting as he laid down. Really? I am going to die from this itself." Opening blood points. It was easy to say. However, this wasn't the unsealing technique which people normally used, but rather a proper technique that even the best masters in the sects would have trouble performing. Wouldn't it be easy to just use his own internal ki and cause damage to the opponent's body in the right way to get their clogged parts opened? But the amount of ki couldn't be too much or too little. Excessive ki could damage the meridians, and using lesser ki would be plain meaningless. So it had to be exactly the right power. This meant that he had to hit the person accurately after grasping the level of ki in that person. Chung Myung too had also taken the soul vitality pill to get a step further, so it was something he could do now. But of course, every time he did this, he could feel the concentration of his ki draining fast. What more glory and joy can I enjoy? If he had been the old Chung Myung, he wouldn't have put so much effort into another person. At that time, he would have thought of his own strength and trained harder to get stronger all by himself. But Chung Myung now wasn't the same as he was in the past. No matter how strong you are, what will change? After all, there are things which cannot be achieved by one person alone, and there will always be places you cannot reach by yourself. I know. You're nagging again. Chung Myung nodded as he groaned. Actually, even if this didn't help them immediately, one day their body would fully absorb the ki of the soul vitality pill. It wasn't because absorbing its ki was difficult, but rather it was because their levels were just too low to absorb it as they currently were. But that isn't enough. Someday wouldn't work. Anyway, anyone who climbs the mountain can try to reach the summit, but there is a difference between those who stepped onto it earlier and those who came late. Becoming stronger a few years earlier than others can mean that they could go farther in the future. One big hit is awesome. When he thought of his Sahyungs who had been beaten for 5 days straight and would still come rushing at him with light in their eyes, he smiled without realizing. In the past, when Chung Myung offered them a spar, most of the people would run away without another look. Of course, it was because Chung Myung wasn't valued like he was now. But the toughness these ones have surpasses the old ones. He was excited. As he watched them grow stronger day by day, the desire to teach them and make them grow little by little was also rising within him. That was why he was trying this much. So, Chung Myung looked at the night sky and mumbled, "If I teach them, they will teach the other Sahyungs and the other disciples, And if that keeps happening over and over again, the entire Mount Hua Sect will become stronger. Right, Sahyung? It felt like his Sahyung was smiling down on him from above. I know. How funny this sounds. Things he had never worried about during his time as the Plum Blossom Sword Saint Chung Myung mattered a lot to him now. Chung Myung gathered up his energy and blew away the sweat from his body and kept his clothes neat. No one would be able to see his signs of exhaustion. My mind seems more comfortable. Do they even know how much I am suffering for them? Those idiots. Chung Myung grumbled with a pouting mouth and walked to his Sahyungs. Still, maybe the time will come sooner than he thinks. The day when he wasn't burdened like he was now. The day when he had them as his most reliable companions, supporting him from behind. You should always expect what you want to happen. Just when could he use them? To get that done faster, he would have to train them at least twice as aggressively as he did now. But as they were all human, it could ruin them too. There was a limit to how much training could be forced upon. Excessive greed is never good. Chung Myung wasn't anxious and tried to wait a bit longer. Until then, Chung Myung alone would... Chung Myung tilted his head. The Sahyungs, who had been lying on the floor, or thought to be inside the carriage, were waiting for him. What is it? You don't want to rest? Rest? Baekchun shook his head. We cannot take a break after such training. Let's go one more time. Huh? Chung Myung chuckled. Excuse me? Are your legs fine right now? Can you even stand? Jogul even tried to raise the corners of his mouth into a smirk to provoke Chung Myung. Well, if you are having a hard time, I can give you a break. Huh? Yoonjung too didn't back down. You aren't tired already, right? Huh? Did these idiots eat something bad? Yoo Yi-sol also drew her sword and pointed it at Chung Myung. It is fine if you want to rest in this cool air. I'm talking about you. Now, Chung Myung was pissed. Still. Crack. The nerve on his forehead and his clenched hands trembled in anger. It feels like I've been holding back on disciplining you. Chung Myung groaned. There is no need to drag it further. Just jump in. Let's go. I'll break your head. If you lose, I'll kill you. I mean it. All the Sahyungs rushed to Chung Myung with blood in their eyes. At that sight, Chung Myung looked at them with a soft smile. These ones really are some dirty-hearted brats. Sahyung, my sect leader Sahyung, this Mount Hua is pretty good too. Chapter 182. What in the world is this? Depending on one's perspective, it could be considered a long time or a short time. But finally, the carriage carrying Mount Hua's disciples entered the Sichuan province. Whoa! As the carriage approached the gate, the eyes of everyone standing nearby focused on them. Anyone with enough money to ride a horse-drawn carriage was certain to be precious and influential. It was only natural to be curious. Libo, who pulled the reins, glanced back and shouted, "We have arrived in Chengdu!" The flinching inside the carriage could be felt. Keek! Keek! Soon, the carriage door opened and the disciples of Mount Hua walked out. What is that? What is with their appearance? Have they been to a war? The crowd began to clamor and gossip. Needless to say, the disciples that emerged from the wagon no longer appeared human. I'm gonna die. We worked hard, leaving home. We've reached Sichuan. We're halfway there. When will we ever reach Yunnan? The tragic sight of Mount Hua's disciples was simply reminiscent of a severely sick person. Wide eyes, shaking legs, and sagging shoulders. Even Chung Myung looked gloomy. This was one hellish journey. Let's not do this again. Half left, another half. The gates of the unfamiliar Sichuan looked like the gates to another world. For now, Mount Hua's disciples felt like crying since they could finally escape the constant repetition of their training. Huh! I thought something interesting would occur if we did it for another 2 days. Looking at Chung Myung, who had regained his taste for training, resentment poured in from all sides. Enough! Another 2 days! I would be a corpse by then. I'd rather just die. Kill me. You really don't have a heart, do you? Even Chung Myung flinched in the face of their fearsome momentum. Anyway, we arrived alive, so this should be fine. While the disciples were talking, Libo came down the horse. What would you like to do now? Would you like to head to the Eunha's branch in Sichuan? Well, Baekchun frowned. Seeing his reaction, Libo continued. The Sichuan branch has been given the orders to gather information about Yunnan. Would it have been gathered? Libo frowned and spoke with a sigh. Honestly, Eunha's information gathering network doesn't extend to Yunnan. In the past, we dealt with Yunnan, but even then, it was more like brokering the needs brought by the small merchants rather than a merchant union. I see. In other words, we cannot find a way to enter Yunnan with the ability of Eunha. From now on, there might be nothing we can do to help. Instead, we can provide you with accommodation as long as you need it. So please come to the branch if you need a place to stay. Thank you for that. We will check the situation and then head to the branch, so you can head there first and rest. Okay, I will go ahead and repair the carriage as well as prepare for your stay. Let me know once you're done checking the situation. Yes, thank you. When Baekchun finished speaking, Libo bowed his head and went back onto the carriage. As he drove the carriage away through the city gates, Baekchun looked back at his juniors. We should also head in. Yes, but keep one thing in mind. He spoke with a cautious face. We came here to find a way to enter Yunnan, not to cause trouble. The capital of Sichuan is the domain of the Sichuan Tang family, and there is also the Chung sect not far from here. So people from the sect will often come and go through this area. It's rare, but we might also cross paths with the female monks of the Heavenly sect. So make sure to keep your act together. Don't worry, Sasuke. The Sahyungs all know this pretty well. A vein on Baekchun's forehead grew and popped in anger. You! It is you! You bastard! I'm not talking about the others. You are the problem. Have you ever seen me create a problem? When have you not created problems? With a long breath, Baekchun struggled to calm his mind and spoke in a serious tone. Keep in mind, we will leave as soon as we find a way to enter Yunnan. Don't create trouble. Even now in Mount Hua, our elders are waiting for us to come back safe and sound. Even if it's only 1 day, we must complete our task and return as quickly as possible. Don't worry about it. Baekchun was suddenly desperate to search for a drug that could make someone shut up. First, we should visit the Beggars Union branch. But I think the merchants might know more about Yunnan than the Beggars Union, so it may be better to start our search from there. Let's do it that way. Baekchun nodded at Yu Yiseol's answer. Let's go. The party from Mount Hua diligently searched around and worked hard to gather information about Yunnan. Chung Myung complained that the entire process was useless, but Baekchun took a different stance. He believed that one little piece of information could change their fate. Yunnan was a place where communication had been severed, so he wanted anything, even just one more piece of information about it. But the disciples of Mount Hua, who sat at a table in a guest house, let out a deep sigh. Sichuan is right next to Yunnan, so how can they have no information? The Beggars Union was the most shocking. Yoonjung couldn't hide his embarrassment. A way to enter Yunnan? Why are you asking us about it? The calm words of the branch leader continued to resonate in his mind. The man responded with a snort when asked if they could get any relevant information. Beggars can't live in Yunnan, so how can we have any information? It was a statement that completely trampled on their hope. Yunnan was such a barren land that no one could beg, so even the Beggars' Union wouldn't enter recklessly. First of all, wouldn't they need to find some source of food in order to operate there? In addition, the branch leader said that the Nanman Beast Palace is wary about the Beggars' Union establishing a branch and constantly monitors them. The same goes for the merchants. We have no options. We found nothing. Yunjong sighed and spoke. There is no information about Yunnan. Let's not have hope for the merchants. So, maybe that's not the case. Huh? Yunjong turned to Jogul, who spoke. The Beggars' Union might not have information about Yunnan, but not the merchants. They know, but they're withholding the information. Why? Because there's no reason to tell us. Where's the profit in that? Didn't we tell them we would pay for it? It isn't enough. We would need to have taken Mount Hua's symbol off our clothes at least. Ah, Baekchun explained, upon understanding Jogul's words. So they rejected us. Jogul nodded his head. Sichuan is a place where the exclusion of outsiders is more severe than you think. It's far from the center of the Central Plains, and there are historical problems of the past. Right. Even in government offices, it was said that people from Sichuan were never selected as officials. For the Central Plains, Sichuan was a land of foreigners that was ostracized and excluded. The Sichuan Tang family has a lot of influence here. In order to make a living in the capital, Chengdu, we need to look for the Tang family. Would such people proudly welcome foreigners wearing the robes of another sect? Chung Myung, who heard it, yelled, "You should have told us right away!" If I did, would you have taken it off? No, but it's still annoying. Chung Myung pouted. Should he hide that he was from Mount Hua? That was impossible. He would rather be rejected openly. Then let's wear a mask and go out at night. No. Anyway, don't do it like that. If we really need to get information, we must get the support from the Sichuan Tang family, or at least hide that we're outsiders. Baekchun nodded his head with a solemn expression. I get what you mean. Then suddenly, Yunjong looked at Jogul and asked, "But how did you know? Wait, are you from Sichuan?" Jogul's face turned somber. "Come to think of it, I remember you saying that your house is in Sichuan, right?" Jogul felt like he was going to die and answered with a sigh. Yes. Oh, so, Baekchun exclaimed like he finally understood. It wouldn't have been easy to know these facts if he wasn't from Sichuan. Baekchun felt like he had grabbed some sort of clue. Chung Myung's eyes twinkled. But, Jogul Sahyung, didn't you say that you were a merchant's son? How can we go back without going to Jogul Sahyung's house? No, how bad is your personality to make us run all around the city because you don't want us as guests in your house? What a horrible personality! You're the last person I want to hear that from. Jogul trembled in rage. At that moment, all the disciples of Mount Hua agreed with Jogul's words. Hearing such words from Chung Myung was a wretched insult. No, it isn't like that. Jogul took a deep breath. Enough. Chung Myung smiled and patted him on the shoulder. It's all the same. I'm sure it's a story of a child who's been kicked from his home, so he probably doesn't want to go back to that house. It's okay, it's fine. Baekchun Sasuk will understand your feelings. I left with my own feet, on my own feet. Read the air, Sasuk. Chung Myung smiled and poked Jogul in the ribs. Anyway, since it's come to this, let's go home, Sahyung. Jogul sighed deeply and got up. Right, sure. This is all for the sect. Then, let's go. Right away. Yes, Sasuk. Everyone left the guest house with a slightly brighter face and started to walk along with Jogul. Chung Myung put his hands behind the back of his head and whistled. How is it that not a single person in your family respects you? Feeling the comment stab like a needle poking his head, Baekchun turned around furiously. No, I'm not talking about you, Sasuk. Not everything in the world is about you. Then say it properly. Baekchun grunted. Why would a person who is pretty famous and well-loved enter Mount Hua? Huh? I can't let that comment slide. Isn't that like saying you would have gone to the Jungnam sect if they weren't crooked? Our sect leader should hear this. Baekchun shook his head at Chung Myung's words. The important thing is that I chose Mount Hua. Right. If you had gone to the Jungnam sect, you would still be carrying the burden of your older brother even now. Baekchun's hand went for his sword, but Yoonjung grabbed his hand and shook his head. Calm down. Let's cover our ears and close our eyes. Fucking bastard. Meanwhile, Jogul led them all to the way to the corner of Chengdu. Oh, is it that one there? A small shopping center came into Chung Myung's eyes. Chengdu Merchant Shop. It felt like a randomly made-up name, but it was clear that it was a merchant shop. The slightly old-looking building and small scale gave it a cute appearance. Wow, you're the second person to enter Mount Hua because of your family. Anyway, Jogul Sayong also has a pretty cute side to him. Can we greet your parents too? As Chung Myung walked along, Jogul sighed and called out to him. Where are you going? Huh? Did Sayong want to go first? That's not the right way. It's this way. What? Where? Here. Chung Myung's gaze returned to where Jogul pointed. A wall? A wall was visible. He turned his head, but he could only see a large wall painted red. There, he saw he found a very large door. 4C's Merchant Chamber. Chung Myung's eyes trembled. The wall was so wide that it was impossible to see the end, and many impressive pavilions were inside. Chung Myung, who alternated between this shocking sight and Jogul, opened his mouth and spoke with a trembling voice. No way, right? It is. This is the one? Yes. This is Jogul Sayong's house? This mansion where an emperor would live? Yes. Sayong is the child of this house? Oh my, what in the hell is happening? Chapter 183. What in the world is this? Everyone looked back and forth between the large pavilion and Jogul. The unfocused gazes alternated between the two of them. Jogul, who became the star of their strange gazes, put his mouth to the fist and coughed low. This here? Yes. This place? I said yes. Chung Myung opened his mouth. Jogul Sayong is their son? You must be the servant's son, right? This is my house. Chung Myung shook his head and placed his hand on Jogul's shoulder. No, think carefully about this, Sayong. What? A person's life is revealed on their face. Looking at the face of Jogul Sayong, who would ever think you're the son of a wealthy family? No matter who sees you, you look like the son of a laborer. Hey! Unable to bear it, Jogul kicked Chung Myung. Why? Is it really so strange that I'm the son of this family? Very. Greatly. Really, it is strange, Jogul. When he looked into the eyes of those who didn't believe him, even Baekchun, Jogul bowed his head. And these people are my Sayongs. Tears were stinging his eyes. Jogul, be honest, is this really your house? Sayong. Even Yoonjung couldn't believe it. Seeing this, Jogul grabbed his own head in distress, and Yoonjung spoke with a flustered expression. No, but didn't you tell me that you were from a small house? I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Huh? It just fits so well without you in the picture. No. Do I look that weird? Is it that strange? No, it isn't strange. Your eyes are saying that it's strange. Now. You can see that? Yoonjung was visibly embarrassed, which made Jogul even more depressed. Chung Myung, who had been kicked away, returned at that time. No, it could be possible. Such things are common. The disrespected son of a successful family couldn't stand it any longer and left home. Shut it! Baekchun grunted through his teeth. I wasn't talking about Sasuk. Then why are you looking at me when you say it, you damn bastard? It seemed like the people inside could hear their chattering and spoke up. Who dares to speak like this in front of the door of the Four Seas Merchant Chamber? The massive door opened, and an old man with a sharp face emerged. With a harsh glare, he looked at the disciples of Mount Hua and... Huh? Oh, young master! Young master? Chung Myung whispered to Yoonjung. Did I hear him right? Looks like it. It makes me want to tear my ears out. The old man hurried to Jogul. No, it is the young master. No, young lord. The young lord is here. Welcome back. Chung Myung whispered again. It seems like welcome back is used differently in Sichuan. I think so too. Maybe it's a dialect thing. I can hear you. I can hear everything. Jogul frowned as he looked at those two. However, it seemed like the other disciples of Mount Hua were invisible to the old man. He embraced Jogul with tears flowing down his face. Young lord, it is truly wonderful that you came back. Really. Samjongwan, calm down. Chung Myung whispered again. It feels like he is a real family member. Why is he talking informally to the old man? Really? Wait. That's not what you're supposed to say, is it? Even in the midst of this, Yoonjung was too shocked to maintain his composure. You, here, spread word that the young lord is back. Go now. The servants rushed inside at the old man's command. Chung Myung looked at Jogul, who was busy calming the old man, and clicked his tongue. No matter how difficult it may be, a person shouldn't be judged by their appearance. It seemed like Jogul must really be the son of a wealthy family. Yoonjung Sahyung, would you happen to have any hidden family too? Like, you're the hidden child of some high-ranking official or something. I'm an orphan. Right. Usually, that's how it should be. It was strange how they welcomed Jogul, but the tearful reunion didn't last long as the old man began to notice the others. And, who are these people? They're my sect Sasuk and Sahyungs. Baekchun took the lead. I am Baekchun, a second-class disciple of Mount Hua. We ended up visiting my Sajil's family due to an unexpected situation. I apologize for the sudden visit without giving any notice before we came here. No, how can you say that? Thank you for coming. Sam Jongwon wiped the corner of his eyes with his sleeve. Since the young lord went to Mount Hua, we have been worried sick because we haven't had any contact for a long time. I would have visited him several times if it hadn't been for the Lord's orders. Jogul became awkward as he waved his hand at the old man. Let's go in first. It isn't polite to have my Sasuk stand around here. I must have been so excited that I didn't notice. Let's head in. Sam Jongwan let them in. The disciples shared the same thoughts as they entered through the large main gate. I think it's bigger than Mount Hua's gate. Look at this. This is the first time I've seen such a splendid home. Oh my, he looks different now. Mount Hua's disciples were all quite sensitive to money since they had lived in poverty for so long. As a result, it felt like a bright light was shining from Jogul, the child of this wealthy family. And... Go! The group soon saw two people running out. It was a middle-aged woman in a silk robe and an older man in red silk. At this point, the identity of these two could be easily guessed even if they didn't want to know. The woman rushed to Jogul and hugged him. You ignorant child! Why are you so late to come home? I'm sorry, mother. The middle-aged man leaned back and turned his head. He was probably holding back his tears. Well, it was so colorful, between the flashy clothes and the wide house. It was an unexpected scene, but it was a warm sight. 3 people and a runaway child stood there, looking at each other. Life is unfair. I mean it. Look at him, doing so well. Betrayer, deceiver. Even Chung Myung trembled at the sight. Look at this guy. Why was he reborn as a beggar? If Chung Myung had been born into this family, then everything would have been 10 times easier. Like this, a member of Mount Hua reunited with his family, and the other 4 disciples looked on at their happiness with hurting stomachs. So, Chung Myung looked at the rare and richly plated dishes in front of him and glared at Jogul. Jogul recoiled from the sharp gaze. You must have a lot of money. Kah! I didn't even know this. The young master of a wealthy family. Right, you are a young master. I had no idea. Jogul coughed. When it comes to a sect, everyone is on the same level. Doesn't matter what family we came from. It matters. I have no home. Me too. I don't have one either. When Baekchun slightly hesitated to speak, Chung Myung said, It's fine, Sasuk, because you were kicked out too. On my feet. I left with my own feet. Chung Myung neatly ignored Baekchun's words and continued to make a fuss. You had so much money, but didn't give a penny while Mount Hua was ruined, right? No. I'm not old enough to spend my family's money. Do you think that this is my money? Is that my money? You can request a favor. Even enemies can give each other food when requested. Traitor! Deceiver! Jogul's stomach flipped at their sharp gazes. They didn't know the situation as well as they thought. At that time, Jogul knew Mount Hua was suffering, but if he had asked his father to support the sect with his family's money, then his father would have run to Mount Hua right away and dragged him back home. His father is a merchant. He would never spend even a dime on a failing sect that held no value as an investment. Anyway, seeing that Jogul was troubled, Baekchun intervened. Let's not overdo it. We just misunderstood each other, and it doesn't even seem like you were hiding it intentionally. But the public opinion wasn't good. Look at how the children with families help each other. We're all orphans here. Yeah. Baekchun coughed with a flushed face. No, it isn't like that. That isn't important right now. What is important is finding a way to Yunnan, right? Chung Myung, who was worried there wouldn't be a Mount Hua to return to if they did something bad or failed to get to Yunnan, eventually held back a sigh and spoke. So what did your father say? I haven't spoken to him yet. Why? That is a little... Jogul took a deep breath. The deadline I originally promised to stay in Mount Hua has already passed. I should have already returned to the family last year to help with work. Then why didn't you go back? Because you showed up. But Jogul couldn't possibly say that to Chung Myung. Anyway, things happened, so now my father thinks I'm back here for the family's sake. I need to clear up that misunderstanding first. No, it's fine. We just need to go. What are you saying? I am a disciple of Mount Hua. Even if it means death, I will follow you to Yunnan. Oh my, what can we say to a man of high status? Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders while Yoonjung whispered and secretly asked, Is Jogul's status very high? Sayong, can't you tell despite seeing him this close? I don't know what it means, but looking at the skill of this place, it doesn't seem to lag too far behind the Eunha Guild, right? Then Jogul Sayong is at least on a similar level as the young master of the Eunha Merchant Guild. Chung Myung spoke firmly and pointed to Jogul. So Jogul Sayong is at the level of a young master to the guild. Wait, thinking about it, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? I feel the same way. When they thought of Hwang Jonggi, who would always bow until his head touched the ground upon visiting Mount Hua, Jogul's status seemed to plummet in their minds. This isn't such a big deal. How great can you be? Zhouge looks friendly again. If Huang Zhongyi had heard the disciples of Mount Hua talking like this, he would die of a heart attack. And in response, Zhouge also began to tremble. It was burdensome that they began to look at him differently. But when he was ignored again, like this, he felt strangely angry. Well, Zhouge sighed and spoke. I'm going to have dinner with my family later, so I will ask about Yunnan, Sasuk. Baekchun nodded. It won't be easy, but please take care of it. Whether we negotiate with the Naman Beast Palace or we hide and pilfer from their land, we need to know about Yunnan and everything about it. I know. If there is anything we need to do, just tell me. Yes, Sasuk. Zhouge looked at them and turned around as he sighed. Then, Sahyung! Huh? Have someone downstairs fetch me some alcohol. Come on, young master. Don't ignore me. Why not ask for alcohol? Normally I wouldn't ask, but after they served us this much food, we need something to drink on the side. Something expensive. Sahyung, I'm telling you again. Chung Myung spoke with a serious face. Make sure they bring expensive ones. This sly ghost. No one can catch him. Chapter 184. What in the world is this? Did you say Yunnan? Zhou Pyong's voice seemed slightly angered. Zhouge shut his eyes slightly as he heard that voice. His father, with his unfamiliar gray hair, was looking at him after a long time. Yes, you are asking this after you know what Yunnan is like. Yes, despite knowing that. Zhouge's face trembled. Is this what you say after you come back after 5 years? That you want to go to Yunnan? So this doesn't mean that you're coming home then? No, you brat! Zhou Pyong looked at Zhouge with anger. The time you had promised to come back home has already passed. You come back home so late, and then you tell me that you aren't here for the sake of the promise. And you are talking about all these things. His voice was clearly filled with anger. However, he wasn't a child who did not know about the worries and regrets of his father. This is why I didn't want to come. Zhouge sighed as he turned his head. It was a situation he would have had to face one day. Father. Right, say it. Going to Yunnan is something I must do. What you must do is come back home and succeed the family business. Isn't brother here for that? Have you forgotten about our family tradition? It is the law of this family to have our entire business run by the whole family. Zhouge sighed. I promised the sect leader that this trip to Yunnan would be a success. Then the promise you made to me wasn't a promise? Don't say anything else. Their thoughts were already in different directions. I even allowed you to enter that fallen Mount Hua because you wanted to test yourself at a place that wasn't under the influence of our family. Wasn't it because you believed that you could grow through the suffering in that declining place? And you are saying that you want to give all this up and stay in that Mount Hua. Mount Hua is no longer a fallen sect. Soon, the name of Mount Hua will resound throughout the world. Zhou Pyong looked at Zhouge. If you say that, it could be true. He didn't deny or ignore the words of his son. But that is something Mount Hua will handle. The place where you need to be is none other than this place, our family merchant chamber. Gul. Zhou Pyong took a deep breath. I am your father. How can you not understand the feeling of your father who sent his son to a faraway place? Father. Zhouge bit his lip. The whole conversation made him feel like he was being pulled into their advances, and he was even aware of his mistakes. I need to find a way to get to Yunnan. Till the end. I hope we can talk after that. His father looked at him, and Zhouge spoke without taking his eyes off him. This is something I must do as a man and a disciple of Mount Hua. I cannot do anything else without getting this task done. Please allow me to do this my way one more time. Jo Pyong let out a hoarse sigh. Are you aware of how dangerous Yunnan is? Yes, I am prepared. I understand what you mean. However, I do not know of the way to go to Yunnan. Jogul looked at his father and said, I have confirmed that there is a path in the Yunnan mountain which runs from Chengdu, and with our family's name, we can make it possible. But without some form of believable excuse, passing through the place wouldn't be possible. Besides, no matter how much the Nanman Beast Palace blocks it, there would be at least a few people there, or maybe even trade happening, right? Jo Pyong bit his lip. From what he knew, Jogul had only arrived today, and in that very short time, he was able to tour the city. However, the fact that he had already planned out how to get there meant that he was already figuring things out in his own way. This is a good sign. To be immersed in the path of the sword like a child, that was the only thing that he couldn't understand. What do you want to say? There is a company traveling to Yunnan. Jo Pyong's eyes lit up. Whether it's for smuggling or a formal trade with the palace, regardless of whether it was a small group or a large one, there is something going on. A viable trade route. Let us accompany them. We are even fine being porters. No. It wasn't Jo Pyong who said it, but rather Jogul's mother, Hwa Yeonbi, who was silently listening to the conversation until then, spoke up. Mother! Yunnan is a dangerous place, and the fact that you want to enter Yunnan by lying about your identity means that your task is even more dangerous, right? Jogul bowed his head without answering. It was impossible to lie to his parents, whom he had met after 5 years. What kind of parent would send their child knowing that? No, never. Mother, Jogul called her firmly. Wasn't it you who told me that leading a merchant chamber is a risky job? How can someone who cannot even go to Yunnan be a good merchant? So please send me. You don't even want to be a merchant. At that time, Jo Pyong spoke in a displeased tone. Do you really have to go? Yes. And what if I don't allow you? Then, Jogul spoke with determined eyes. I will enter Yunnan on foot, wearing this plum blossom robe. You! In the end, Jo Pyong couldn't calm his anger and jumped up from his seat and locked eyes with his son. Jogul stared back into the eyes of his father calmly. After the brief staring battle, his father sat back down. He is growing up. As a merchant who had done numerous trades, he knew a lot of things. In this situation, he knew that neither beating nor objecting to his decision would change the path of the man who had set his mind on it. Jo Pyong bit his lip, wondering if he would lose his child if he tried to catch him by the ankle. Then, let's do this. What? You're not going to Yunnan right now, are you? Aren't you going to do it with Mount Hua? Right. So you will do it with the disciples of Mount Hua? Yes, Jogul answered in a wavering voice. This wasn't supposed to go like this. Then the people who came with you will accompany you to Yunnan. Jo Pyong didn't wait for the answer. Then I will meet them and decide. They are people whom I have to trust so that I can entrust you to them. This is my best offer. What do you think? The light disappeared in Jogul's eyes. Wondering about what was going on in his father's head, Jogul, trying to control his trembling eyes, said, Huh? Have one person excluded, maybe? Jo Pyong looked at his son with a confused expression. That is why I have invited you all. Baekchun lightly moved. I am late to greet you. I am Baekchun, a second-class disciple of Mount Hua. We unexpectedly visited our Sajil's home, so please understand since we were unable to prepare anything on our way here. Think of it as your home and stay comfortably. If you are Gul Sasuk, then you are family to me. Thank you for the hospitality. Baekchun smiled brightly and said, However, there is something I need to address, even though it may be embarrassing to say. By something you mean to address, you mean... Baekchun looked at Jogul and then said, Mount Hua did not know about the promise Sajil Jogul made with the Lord. If we had known, the sect leader would have sent Jogul back right away. Of course, this kid wouldn't have said anything. Thank you for understanding. Seeing Baekchun stand his ground, Jo Pyong was happy. He seems like he is from the heavens. The appearance of Baekchun in his white robe and the words from his mouth would make anyone admire him. How could one not admire the person who gave out such courtesy and dignity? The same went for those who were on either side of Baekchun. The person on the right didn't stand out, but it was obvious that he was a man with deep thoughts from his calm demeanor. And the woman on his left with the off-white colored robe, the softness and modest look on her face and her versatile gestures were all amazing. Mount Hua is overflowing with great disciples. He could understand why Jogul wanted to stay with Mount Hua. But among them, next to her, the youngest disciple of Mount Hua is a bit, he's strange. Ever since he came in, he was unable to take his eyes off the disciple with a bottle in front of him. The disciple was also looking at the bottle with eyes as if he was getting drunk just by looking at it. But that person... Baekchun waved his hand. Don't worry about it. No, it's okay. That is how he normally is. He was drinking before, but since he was stopped in the middle, he's feeling a bit, upset. Huh? Alcohol. A Taoist. Chung Myung looked at the bottle and licked his lips. That's why I said I wouldn't come. Be quiet. Baekchun stopped him from talking, and Yu Yi-sol stabbed him in the side with her finger. As if he felt bad, Chung Myung went silent. Seeing this, Jo Pyong knew whom Jogul was trying to get rid of. Right, not everyone can be perfect. But why was this child sent with this group? This was something he couldn't know. Did you say that you needed to go to Yunnan for business? Yes, Jo Pyong sighed. It is difficult for me to see my son, who finally returned after 5 years, and now he insists on going to Yunnan. Baekchun looked at Jogul, and Jogul bowed his head. Look at this. When Jo Pyong was scolding him, he looked at his father right in the eye, but in front of Baekchun, he bowed down. This showed how much Jogul respected Baekchun. What can we do to help? Actually, rather than helping, I wanted to make sure that I was sending my child with people I could trust to the dangerous Yunnan. I understand. Baekchun then said, You don't have to send him. Baekchun said it firmly again. No parent will want to send their child to such a place. I will not take Jogul to Yunnan, so the Lord can simply help us to get to Yunnan. I'm coming, Sasuk. Jogul jumped up from his seat. I will not let you go without me. Even if you break my legs, I will go there crawling with what I have left. Don't even think of not taking me with you. Sit down. Sasuk! I said, sit down. Jogul bit his lip as he sat down. In the meantime, Chung Myung retrieved his hand that was reaching out for the bottle. If only they had fought a little more. Then he could take another sip. Sasuk, I told the sect leader that I would go to Yunnan and come back after succeeding. No matter how young I am, nothing is going to stop me. Do you really think that? If sect leader knew about your promise, would he have told you to go to Yunnan? That is, Baekchun continued. The sect is important, but so is family. Is it really your path to be doing something your parents don't want you to? Sasuk, you stay here and die. At that time, Chung Myung, who only paid attention to the bottle, spoke. Just do what you want to. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung with an expression which said he was done. Stay still. No, this isn't right, Sasuk. What isn't right? Does it make sense to leave Sahyong and go to Yunnan comfortably? I'd rather have a hard time together. Baekchun's face hardened at it. This is Jogul's family matter. And what we are doing is our sect's matter. Chung Myung's voice wasn't serious, but it wasn't playful either. Because of that, Baekchun looked at him with a serious face. It isn't up to Sasuk to decide if the family or the sect is important for another person. The one who has the right to decide is Jogul Sahyung. But even if Sasuk is higher than Sahyung in seniority, you cannot force him to do that. It is a matter of heart and mind. Right, heart. They were strangely poignant words. And when Baekchun went silent, Chung Myung turned to Jogul. Sahyung, what do you plan on doing? Are you saying I can decide? Isn't that natural? But to go to Yunnan, we need my family's help. Seriously? Chung Myung cut off Jogul's words, and without hesitation, he grabbed the bottle this time and gulped it down. And once he was done, Kyah! Chung Myung wiped his mouth and spoke with a smile. You are worried about everything. Who am I? Even if we don't go through with this, we can go break the heads of the Naman Beast Palace bastards. Don't worry about any of that and do what you want to. Chung Myung was twisting his hands as if he was trying to portray that he would crush them. Seeing that, Jogul couldn't stop smiling. It's strange to see him do things like this to make me feel at ease. Jogul had a brighter expression and said, It was then. Knock, knock. A high-pitched voice came from behind the door along with a few knocks. Master, what is it? A guest has come. This late at night, Jo Pyung's face went cold. Chapter 185. What in the world is this? This was the Four Seas Merchant Chamber. In Chengdu, it could be said that the name of this place touched the sky, and it was rude for someone to knock on the doors of a closed merchant place at night. There were only two kinds of people who would commit such disrespect. One was a trader who had something urgent to relay despite knowing it was rude, and the other one, they are those who don't care about the fact that it was a rude act. The former could be anyone, but the latter, there was only one group bold enough to do it in Sichuan. Who is it? That Jo Pyung could guess who the guests were from the servant's manner of speaking. It was then. Suddenly, it started to get noisy. You must not come in. Please wait. You are not allowed to get in there. Jo Pyung's face hardened. It seemed his guess was right. Why now? Sensing that things were going differently from how he wanted them to, he jumped up from his seat. Bring the guest to my office. Yes. Jo Pyung quickly walked over and opened the door. Unsurprisingly, he saw the servants gathered in a hurry and a few people pushing them. Just 3 people. The 3 people weren't that old and were walking leisurely through the halls. They wore green robes and had slightly clenched hands. And looking at these 2 things, it wasn't difficult to guess what their affiliation was. Stand back. Yes, Lord. Only then did the servants open up the path for the guests in green. As the path opened, the 3 people approached him with a relaxed face. Four Seas Merchant Chamber, Lord. We greet you. When the leader of the group bowed, Jo Pyung looked in the other direction and then his eyes widened. Aren't you from the Tang family? The one who took the lead was Tang Zhan, one of the minor lords in the Sichuan Tang family. Tang Zhan, the 5th son of the Lord. If he was the 5th son of the Lord, then he wasn't a person who wielded much power. But when it came to the Tang family, things were different. In the Tang family, where blood came first, everything was inherited by blood, and the 5th son also had power. Although he was young now and couldn't hold any key positions, there was a high chance that he could become the backbone of a party in a couple years. And such a person was openly invading his home at night. Jo Pyung's face darkened. It seems that he didn't come here to do anything good. When there was no response from the other side, Jo Pyung moved. It is an honor to meet the people of the Tang family. But I am very concerned about the fact that you have come to neglect the custom that night times aren't when guests come knocking on doors. Jo-pyung was trying to subtly say that they were disregarding the rules. But Tang-jan just smiled and said, "It is rude only because you didn't feel good about it. So please, the Lord shouldn't blame us too much." "I didn't feel good." "Yes." Tang-jan looked behind Jo-pyung. When Jo-pyung noticed that Tang-jan was looking into the room he had come from, he turned away. "For now, let's head to the office. We can have a cup of tea. I heard from a scholar of your merchant chamber that the second young lord who went to a distant place to study has returned." Jo-pyung bit his lip at those words. Has the news already reached the Tang family? Just half a day had passed since Jogul had returned. Even though this place was the core of the Tang family, he didn't expect that this news would reach them so fast. And this showed that the Tang family had complete control over Chengdu. "Am I wrong?" Jo-pyung's eyes twitched at those words, and he replied, Yes, my son did return home." Jo-pyung didn't speak anything else regarding the subject and waited for Tang-jan to speak. He had to know for what intentions he had come here. "The second young lord, Jogul, is someone that even our Tang family has coveted. So when the lord sent away the young lord to another place, our family head was very heartbroken." As soon as he heard the words, "sent away," Jo-pyung's shoulders shuddered. This is not good. Because of Tang-jan's mention of their family head, he knew that he hadn't come here for a simple event. And despite not saying it out loud, it meant that they had come here on the order of the Tang family head. "So, we came to check." "Check?" "Yes." Tang-jan smiled brightly. "As far as I know, the second young lord Jogul went to Mount Hua, right?" "He did. That is why we want to check it out. He refused to come to the Tang family to learn martial arts, but then went to Mount Hua. So what did he get from them that he couldn't get from us? Wouldn't our disappointment go away even a little bit if we see that the second young lord Jogul come back with greater skills?" Jo-pyung bit his lip. "I knew that this was bound to happen one day, but this is too sudden." Most of the children of all influential families in Chengdu would learn the martial arts of the Tang family. Of course, they never taught them the essential family techniques or methods, because those were things only someone with the Tang bloodline could learn. They didn't even allow girls of the Tang family to learn it since they were scared the girl would give it up once she gets married. So, only boys of the family could learn it. In other words, it meant that the sons of the families could also learn their martial arts. Through this, the Tang family made it impossible for the sons of the famous people in Chengdu to concentrate on other martial arts through the cheap game. In this way, it made other families depend on them, and at the same time, instilled a sense of belonging on their children as a Tang family member. As this process continued for over 100 years, the Tang family completely took over Chengdu City. But Jogul refused to go along with it. "Why do I have to be their puppet?" And Jo-pyung supported it. He wanted to prevent his son from becoming a puppet of the Tang family. However, it was obvious that if he sent Jogul to another sect outside Sichuan, the Tang family would be angry, and so he decided to send him to Mount Hua. There was nothing the Tang family could do against the fallen sect, and since it had a huge name in the past, he believed that his son could learn something there. Above all, it was a place far away from Chengdu. A place perfect for Jogul. As you know, the place where my child went to is Mount Hua. Mount Hua is a sect which has collapsed both in name and reality. I just sent him there because he liked swords so much. I know, we all do, but Tang-jan's face went cold. Isn't it a little misleading to say that Mount Hua has fallen? Isn't the name of Mount Hua now echoing all around the four seas? What do you... My, this merchant is quite behind with his information. Now, the reputation of Mount Hua is resounding throughout the Central Plains. Among them, the name of the third-class disciples, Jogul and Yunjong, and the second-class disciples, Baekchun and Yu Yisol, keep popping up. It has been going around for quite a while now. Jo Pyong's eyes widened. It had to be an exaggeration, but now the Tang family had come to pressure him. But didn't the names which had come up now perfectly match with the people who had come with his son? Even if it is the Tang family, it wouldn't be possible to figure out the identities of everyone who came here in such a short time. Then, it would mean that it was true to an extent that his son's name was already spreading throughout the mouths of the people in Gangho. Especially, Tang Zhan's eyes were showing interest and vigilance at the same time. I heard that Mount Hua's divine dragon, who is known to be one of the closest beings close to perfection in the world, has come here. I couldn't dare to compare with that reputation, but I heard that someone who is strong has come to Chengdu, so how could we not visit despite it being late? Mount Hua's divine dragon. Such a grand name. Jo Pyong also knew that those with such grand names were strong people, and he thought of only one person who could deserve such a name. Are you talking about disciple Baekchun? Tang Zhang laughed. Lord, are you really going to do this? What are you saying? I don't know if you have been ignoring the information from the Central Plains, or if you are trying to deceive me. Deceive? Would I even do that? Tang Zhang looked at Jo Pyong and nodded. He couldn't see this man trying to deceive him. Well, that is fine. It isn't important, so. And he continued. As a Tang family member, I would like to meet the disciples of Mount Hua who came to visit Chengdu. So could you call them out? Of course, including your son. Jo Pyong's eyes turned to his back. What do I do? He knew that the request from the Tang family couldn't be ignored. However, the disciples of Mount Hua were here as his guests, and it was unacceptable to ask such precious guests to appear in front of the Tang family who were baring their teeth at them. They wouldn't harass his son because he was a merchant family member, but the others, he couldn't imagine it. And Jo Pyong, who knew to fear the anger of the Tang family, worried and replied, I understand what you mean, but it is kind of late today, so how about you come back tomorrow since the guests have headed to bed? Headed to bed? The disciples of Mount Hua must be lazy. They traveled a long distance, so the exhaustion. Lord, Tang Zhang spoke in a low voice. This is a request from the Tang family. Are you going to continue to intervene with this? Why would I? Jo Pyong's face turned pale. Anyone knew what it meant to go against the word of Tang, and Jo Pyong would be the last one to do that. Tang Zhang smiled brightly. Oh my, this has unintentionally turned into a form of us persecuting our merchant chamber lord. I apologize. No. Tang Zhang looked at Jo Pyong and said, The disciples of Mount Hua don't seem to have any pride. I am sure they heard my voice, but they still hide in the room till the very end. It was then. Wait! I said wait! This is Sichuan, you brat. The sect leader told us not to make any... Just that one! Huh? Suddenly from within, a loud shouting and sounds of a struggle could be heard. Bang! The door rose into the sky with a thundering noise. Tuck! Seeing the door fall right next to him, Tang Zhang's eyes went wide. He saw a crooked shape. A young man with a bottle of alcohol in one hand and wiping his lips with the other came out. Is he drunk? Is this drunk behavior? Meanwhile, Tang Zhang didn't miss the plum blossom pattern on his robe. It was a moment he tried to speak with a puzzled face. Who are you, coming here at night for a fight? Do you want an ass-kicking? It was the most absurd question he had ever heard in his life. Chapter 186. With those skills, Jo Pyung's eyes bulged as if they would pop out. Want an ass kicking? Jo Pyung couldn't process what he had just heard for a moment, and he needed to spend a period of time in contemplation. He had never imagined that he would experience such a vulgar act toward the Tang family. Who was Tangjan? Wasn't he the fifth son of the Tang family, an incredibly influential figure in Sichuan and Chengdu? Would anyone in Chengdu ever dare to say such a thing to the Tang family? If there was such a person, it had to be someone strong enough to keep their heavenly fathers under control, or else he must be insane. Unfortunately, the current situation seemed closer to the latter case, because this young man couldn't possibly be on par with the Tang family's strongest, which meant, how am I supposed to fix this? His mind was going blank. The reason for Sichuan Tang family's fame, despite their low numbers, is not simply their overwhelming strength. It was also because of their tenacity and stubbornness. Even though it was a political faction here, it was more closely considered a sect because they never forget their resentment and are sensitive to blasphemy and disrespect. But now, this child had openly defamed the Tang family. So how were they going to strike back? The aftermath of this incident wasn't likely to stop at just Mount Hua either. Perhaps the merchant chamber would also need to take some responsibility for this event. However, contrary to Jo Pyung's concerns, Tangjan wasn't particularly angry. His expression showed more absurdity than anger, and his family's creed that he couldn't be enraged under any circumstances suppressed him. With his eyes squinted, Tangjan frowned and closely watched the man. Mount Hua's robe was adorned with a plum blossom pattern. The boy's face still hadn't shaken off his teenage youth, showing that he was still young. It was certain that he was a disciple of Mount Hua, but he wasn't certain which disciple there had spoken out. Who are you? Tangjan opened his mouth with utmost calmness and courtesy he could muster. But the reaction he received challenged all of that. Who are you? A rude and discourteous reaction. The person speaking had a flustered face and held a bottle of alcohol in his hand. Putting it all together, Tangjan came to one conclusion. He is drunk. He had no intention of picking a fight with a drunkard, but to drink like this in a foreign land where they have no influence. Are all the rumors floating around about Mount Hua just plain exaggeration? In Tangjan's mind, his assessment of Mount Hua began to plummet. At the same time, as if protesting the falling reputation, the others dressed in Mount Hua's robes rushed out. He is very drunk. We apologize. Let's go in. Come on, Chung Myung, let's go. The disciples of Mount Hua grabbed the drunk man by his limbs and began to pull him away. Up to this point, Tangjan could have just left the issue and laughed. But the problem was the drunk's name, Chung Myung. His voice couldn't hold back his shock as he asked, You mean that man is Mount Hua's divine dragon, Chung Myung? He seemed surprised and shock filled his eyes. Jo Pyung, who also heard that, alternated between looking at the disciples of Mount Hua and Tangjan in complete stupefaction. Mount Hua's divine dragon? That person? Jo Pyung's words echoed the feeling of Tangjan too. Mount Hua's divine dragon. Lately, that name was often preceded by another title, the greatest young genius in the world. The envy and expectations of young men would be directed at him, a position that everyone dreamed of getting their hands on, a dream to be the best in the world, a splendid title that only one person could have. He defeated the Jungnam sect's second-class disciples. He even took down disciples of the Wudang and was known to have cornered the Wudang disciples with his Sahyongs. He jumped into the dangerous sword tomb, prevented the annihilation of all inside it, and finally, even won the recognition of Elder Ho Sanja of the Wudang sect. The greatest talent, armed with both strength and intelligence. That man! Tangjan and Jo Pyung's minds seemed to collapse momentarily. It cannot be. No, it couldn't be. Right now, the people standing next to the drunk seemed to fit the name better. One of them was giving out such a fearsome presence that it even made Tangjan nervous. But it wasn't any of them. Instead, this drunk man was the divine dragon. There must be a mistake somewhere. Or maybe the evaluation of Mount Hua's divine dragon was a complete lie. Tangjan frowned. Upon thinking for a moment, he opened his mouth. Are you Mount Hua's divine dragon, Chung Myung? Chung Myung, who was being dragged away, began to yell. Let go! Let go! He's calling me! No, no! No one is calling you! You heard wrong! Wrong! Chung Myung, let's go in! No! He called me just now! Chung Myung waved his arms to shake off his sahyongs before swirling forward again. Then he looked at Tangjan and spoke. You called me? Are you Chung Myung? Ha! Chung Myung took a deep sigh and clicked his tongue. Really? Kids these days. I don't see a single polite bastard. Isn't it basic to say your name first before asking someone else for theirs? Tangjan went silent. Come to think of it, it was true that he had made a mistake. He had forgotten his manners because of the absurdity of the situation. So who are you? Pardon me, I am Tangjan of the Sichuan Tang family. Tang family? Right. Wait, Chung Myung's face contorted. If it's a Tang family, then you should have been well educated. But you come to make a fuss at night and throw people away? All the Tang family members I knew were wiped out. Have some thugs gotten together and created a new Tang family? The more Chung Myung spoke, the redder Tangjan's face became. It was fine to insult him, but this man was directly assaulting his family. In the end, just as he was about to explode in anger, Yoonjong jumped forward and began to slap Chung Myung on the mouth. Your mouth! Your sick mouth! Slap, slap. Ah! Why are you hitting me? Ah! Yoonjong grabbed Chung Myung by the back of his head and began to drag him away. In front of Tangjan, who was looking at this incredulous scene with disbelief, Baekchun sighed in vain and stepped forward. His face was slightly flushed too. We've crossed the line. Excuse us. I am Baekchun of Mount Hua, the righteous sword of Hua. That is too much, but it was indeed a title given to me. Then you're the one who defeated Wudang's sword dragon. It was just a light spar. Tangjan's eyes turned cold. He finally met someone he could actually communicate with. Having been through such an absurd event, he was glad to have someone he could speak with properly. Please, I hope you forgive the rudeness of visiting so late at night. It was difficult to hold myself back once I heard that the disciples of Mount Hua, who are famous throughout the world, had come here. I don't think it was rude. It was just a bit embarrassing to hear that the Tang family wanted to meet with us personally. Tangjan smiled. It is fine, especially. He looked at Jogul, who was standing behind Baekchun. The young lord and her Tang family are quite intimately related. So I wanted to take a look and see what our young lord has learned from Mount Hua. Baekchun's face went stiff. I don't understand. Why would the Tang family want to confirm the achievement of a disciple from Mount Hua? It is really simple. Tangjan smiled leisurely and spoke. He's a disciple of Mount Hua, but also a child of his father's chamber. All those who live within Chengdu have a duty to be verified by the Sichuan Tang family. Baekchun frowned. He wanted to ask how this man could have such authority when they aren't even the imperial family, but he knew it was meaningless. At least in Chengdu, the Tang family reigned like a king. If he handled this clumsily, then it was likely that Jogul's family would suffer the damage for it, not Jogul. This was something neither Baekchun nor Jogul wanted. Sasuk! At Jogul's call, Baekchun turned to him. I will go. Gul, wait. Jogul called Baekchun to move, and then he whispered in a low voice that the Tang family couldn't hear. This is how people live in Chengdu. I don't understand. What is this? Because Mount Hua's reputation has increased, they don't want the powerful people in Chengdu to escape their family's dominance. If they leave me alone, it will serve as a sign to other prestigious families that they can send their sons away to foreign sects and leave the Tang family. Huh? Baekchun was confused. That makes no sense. This is how Sichuan works, and that is the way of the Tang family. If Mount Hua interferes here, things will only get more complicated for us. Leave this to me. Baekchun nodded his head. Okay, but wait for a moment. Yes, Sasuk. Baekchun stepped forward again. He stood closer to Tangjan than before and straightened his back before speaking. How are you going to verify what he's learned? Isn't it obvious? Is there any other way for one Taoist to verify another? The corners of Tangjan's lips curled up. We'll have to share fists to know. Baekchun smiled and nodded. I see. You want to verify the skills of Jogul, a child of the Four Seas Merchant Chamber and third-class disciple of Mount Hua, and announce the results to Chengdu. That's a bit extreme, but it isn't wrong. I also wanted to make friends with the disciples of Mount Hua if possible, but things don't seem to be working out, so let's worry about that later. Tangjan's eyes gleamed coldly. First, give us Jogul. This is an event of the Tang family. We will not tolerate any interruptions. Baekchun's smile grew deeper. Of course, our Mount Hua has no intention of getting involved in matters of the Sichuan Tang family. Well said, but I have a problem. Problem? Yes, a problem. Baekchun shook his head and spoke. I have no intention of intervening with your work, but you don't mean that the people here would be the ones verifying Jogul, right? Why? Would that be a problem? Are you really asking that? With these skills? Tangjan's eyes widened, but Baekchun didn't move and kept looking at him. You dare want to test a disciple of Mount Hua, so you should treat him appropriately. Come here. I'll verify your skills first, and then you can test his. Isn't that fair? Baekchun spoke as he touched his sword on his side, and spoke softly yet firmly. If not, I cannot help but interfere. This is an event of Mount Hua, and I won't tolerate any interruption. All of Mount Hua's disciples, who were looking at Baekchun from the side, stared at him with blank eyes. Sasuk! Wow, Sasuk! Sahyung! He told me not to cause any trouble. What if this causes an accident? The martial sect is really running well. Seriously. Chapter 187. With those skills. The face of Tangjan went stiff. What is this brat talking about? Verification. Who would verify whom? That brat, a disciple of Mount Hua, would verify his family. Grunt. Tangjan clenched his fists. Before he could even open his mouth, his younger brothers, that were standing on his left and right sides, opened their mouths. Hyung, these people must have lost their minds. We tried to be as polite as possible to avoid conflict with Mount Hua, but isn't this a different story when they pick a fight with us first? His younger brothers also failed to contain their anger and impatience. Thinking about it, however, it was normal. When had they ever been treated like this? Have the people of Mount Hua really lost their minds altogether? He could understand that drunkard's behavior. As the size of a sect grows, one or two idiots are bound to be born within it. But how was it possible that the entire group before them were all the same sort of bastards? It would be a different story if Baekchun fought for Jogul by himself. But this was no different from saying that Mount Hua sees the Tang family as insignificant. Clench. Tangjan clenched his teeth and looked at Baekchun with eyes that seemed to say he wanted to rush over and kill him. Can you take responsibility for that? I've always been responsible with my words. There's no reason for my words to be different this time around. Baekchun spoke with ease. Hearing that made Tangjan's anger rise even higher. It was often said that a man goes silent when anger hits the peak. Mount Hua seems like a great sect. You even dare to block the Tang family to protect one of your own disciples. Are you sure you can handle this? Baekchun smirked. It doesn't seem like the Tang family will understand. But our Mount Hua doesn't waste time thinking about protecting the disciples of our sect. What is there to calculate when our first priority is one of our own? It's unlikely. But even if Mount Hua is destroyed because of this, none of the disciples will blame me. That's what Mount Hua is. Such touching words. However, the other disciples' reactions were completely different from the expectations. What did you say? That's a bit much. I'd probably blame you. Aren't you making yourself shine too much? Baekchun closed his mouth with a slightly flushed face. Idiots. Can't even shut their mouths during these moments. Anyway, no matter what the disciples of Mount Hua thought, Tangjang didn't need to take this into account. The important thing was how to punish the man who dared to ignore his family. Righteous Sword of Hua, the man who defeated Wudang's sword dragon. Some might put this man ahead of the divine dragon. Unlike Mount Hua's divine dragon, whose achievements were thought to be exaggerated due to the bizarre and extreme rumors, what this man had accomplished was clearly proven. In particular, was the defeat of Wudang's sword dragon suffered by his hands. That was one of the 5 dragons of the martial world. Wasn't that feat enough to evaluate his power and regard him as a new member of the 5 dragons? There are no shortcomings as an opponent. Tangjang stepped ahead. I am Tangjan of the Sichuan Tang family. Be careful. I'll let you know that mercy doesn't exist from my hands. I am Baekchun of Mount Hua. There's nothing to worry about. My sword knows how to show mercy. Even till the end, you freaking bastard! Tangjan was about to slide his hand into his sleeve when Chung Myung suddenly emerged from behind Baekchun with a sullen expression. Then why are you fighting? Huh? Baekchun looked back, ignoring Tanjan, who was halfway prepared for battle. Huh? Is he really crazy? Turning his back on the opponent was unacceptable. However, aiming for someone's defenseless back was also an act that couldn't be done by rightful Taoists. Thanks to that, Tangjan had to watch what Baekchun was doing with his eyes wide open. Sasuk, you've kept getting involved for a while. Isn't this something Jogul Sayong should take care of? Sen Jogul. I know that Sasuk is greedy for moments to show off, and what you did was cool enough. Now you need to give Jogul Sayong a chance to show off. It's been a while since he met his parents. Baekchun's eyes trembled. Who the hell do you think the Tang family are? Tang family. The Sichuan Tang family. The noble family was known for poison and memorization. Even those with strong bones within the best sects would be in danger if they made a small mistake while dealing with people of the Tang family. Yet Chung Myung wanted to make Jogul, who had little practical experience, deal with such a family. Isn't it too dangerous? It's fine, totally fine. It is said that a tiger must drop their cub off a cliff in order to grow. Then it dies, you idiot. If a tiger could hear such an absurd phrase, it would surely feel wronged. Chung Myung clicked his tongue at Baekchun's reaction. Look at the person above us. Chung Myung knew very well what Baekchun was worried about. However, the act of caring for and protecting someone doesn't always help them. To coddle someone and protect their future is the same as robbing them of experience in the present. It was also something that Chung Myung was most wary of. He knew very well that if he took care of everything, then his descendants would lose the chance to grow up properly. They needed to gain as much as they could from Chung Myung while minimizing the amount they would lose. Does Jogul Sayong look so weak? Chung Myung spoke with a smirk. He wouldn't lose to those guys. Baekchun's face hardened. His trust in Jogul was evident with these words. Surely. How well did I roll him on the ground? If only he didn't speak, maybe it would have been a touching moment. Did Chung Myung know what Baekchun was feeling? Because he suddenly looked at Jogul. Am I wrong, Sayong? Jogul nodded his head. Lose. He wouldn't lose. This was no problem. This was an issue between Jogul and the Tang family, so the solution should come from Jogul. Jogul looked at Chung Myung. But this guy... If Chung Myung were to step forward, this would be resolved easily. because this guy was like a dokgebi that could solve everything. But Jogul understood. I cannot keep hiding behind Chung Myung's back forever. He never had the thought of becoming a burden to Chung Myung. He would never have come along if that was the case. Jogul knew that he was far from Chung Myung's equal in strength, but he at least wanted to help. That was the least he could do to stay together with Chung Myung. If he couldn't solve such matters by himself, wouldn't it be better for him to just die? Sasuk! Baekchun looked at Jogul. I understand Sasuk's words, but this is something I need to deal with. Baekchun sighed. Can you do it? Jogul smiled. I am a disciple of Mount Hua. At this moment, nothing else in the world could be more reliable than this statement. Baekchun received Jogul's laugh with a smile. Go. Yes. With Baekchun and Chung Myung behind him, Jogul walked out as Tangjan frowned. You? Wasn't I the one you wanted to evaluate from the start? Jogul touched his sword around his waist. Then, wouldn't it make sense for you to deal with me? Tangjan straightened. How dare he? It was understandable for Baekchun and Chung Myung to behave so arrogantly. It's common for a dog to naively challenge a tiger without understanding fear. But not Jogul. There was no way that this one, who was born in Chengdu, could be unaware of the Tang family's fearsome nature. Even so, Jogul was confidently challenging him. Tangjan felt that any further discussion was unnecessary. There was no room for courtesy left to give. It was enough to warn everyone what it meant to break Jogul for returning here to go against the Tang family. However, there was just one more thing. You'd better not think this will end quickly. Tangjan, who was determined to release all the insults he had received here, wore his family's green gloves. The green leather gloves, carried by the people of the Tang family, were made of deerskin treated with special drugs to prevent the poison from penetrating themselves. Wearing these green gloves could signal that they would be using poison, but it also meant that they were going to be on alert when dealing with an opponent. Jogul looked at Tangjan with sunken eyes. The confrontation between the two began. Everyone watching was silent and still. But there was only one person who couldn't maintain their composure. Jo Pyong. Jo Pyong seemed to be losing his mind ever since his son had stepped forward. Oh, my God, no! Jogul stepped forward to deal with Tangjan of the Tang family. Who was Tangjan? He was recognized for his outstanding talent among the terrifyingly gifted people of his family. It was insane to see his son, Jogul, attempting to deal with him. Terrified, he couldn't turn away. We must stop him. There was nothing more that he wanted. However, he could see the anger of the Tang family falling on his merchant chamber if he tried to protect Jogul right away. Disciple Tang, this is... All he could think of was coming up with some way to cover up the situation. But at that moment, Father! Gul! Jogul looked at his father with determined eyes. This isn't just about liberation from the Tang family, but also about Mount Hua. Please trust me and wait. What are you even talking about? Shring! Jogul's answer came from his hand rather than his mouth. He drew his sword as he stared at Tangjan. The Sichuan Tang family. At one time, this name echoed in his heart as a symbol of fear, terror, and horror. From the moment he was born as the son of his father, the image of the Tang family always existed above him. But now, it sounds funny to be scared. Tangjan was nothing outstanding when compared to that drunkard watching from behind. How could Jogul, who's fought such a monster, even consider losing to this man? What did he get from Mount Hua? I've received too much to speak of. So, the only option left was to show it off with his sword. Looking at Jogul's cold eyes, Tangjan was about to go when someone spoke up. Hyung! Tangjan turned his head. Do we need to use an axe to kill a chicken? Let me go. His younger brother, Tangho, walked ahead. This is something I... The righteous sword of Hua isn't coming out, so it wouldn't look good if my Hyung goes forward. Tangjan nodded his head. What he said wasn't wrong. It was important for people to act according to their standards. Tangjang whispered as he stepped back. Don't let him out of your hands. Of course. Tangho stood in front of Jogul and tucked his hand into his sleeve. Even if one had never seen them in action and only heard rumors of the Tang family, the meaning of this gesture was clear. When a member of the Tang family put their hands into their sleeve, it meant they were preparing any necessary poisons. Tangho of Sichuan Tang family. Mount Hua's Jogul. Tangho and Jogul locked eyes and glared at one another. The members of the Tang family were taught the faces of all the influential people they would need to rule, just as Jogul was taught from a young age to bow his head before the people of the Tang family. So, Jogul would never have dared to even meet Tangho's eyes in the past, but now he was doing just that and pointing his sword as well. Cheeky bastard! Tangho thought of shattering one of Jogul's hands to teach everyone a lesson. Tangho lightly touched a cowhair needle in his sleeve and scattered them. Dozens of fine needles that were nearly invisible to the naked eye made their way to Jogul at a formidable speed. This doesn't seem like such a big deal. Seeing that Jogul wasn't responding to his attack, Tangho felt elated. Once the needle hit, Jogul would be unable to move. It was then. Pat! Jogul's sword, which previously seemed unable to respond, was swung at a formidable speed. Ka-ka-ka-kang! Jogul's sword deflected the dozens of thrown needles. Tangho was shocked, but he soon realized that this was too early to be surprised. Pat! Jogul's feet touched the ground, and his body shot for Tangho like lightning. Pang! Those who lose their composure cannot win. As he felt Jogul's sword smashing against his neck, Tangho collapsed. No way! Thud. Jogul looked at Tangho, who had fallen to the ground, and his lips twitched. He confidently looked at Tangjang in the face and loudly declared, "Next!" I always wanted to try doing this. Chapter 188. With those skills. One blow. One blow. Tangjan's eyes widened. One hit. Just one hit. Tangjan's gaze turned to Tangho, who had fallen to the floor. How did this happen? Although Tangho was inferior to Tangjan, he was still the son of the family head, and he wasn't at a skill level where an idiot like Jogul could beat him. No, it was a level that any strong martial artist would find hard to overcome. That Tangho had lost consciousness in a single hit and fell in an unsightly way. Was he careless? It had to be that. However, that alone couldn't be the reason that brought upon a situation like this. The skill he possessed, where he aimed for the loopholes in an unsuspecting opponent. Tangjan bit his lip a few times as if he wanted to say something, but eventually went silent. Words didn't mean anything more. Unlike Tangjan, who was trying to hide his expression, Jogul's face was bright. What? How? Tangho was lying on the floor, a direct descendant of the Tang family. For the Jogul of the past, this was a wall he would have never been able to overcome, no matter how much he tried. Tangho was like a star in the sky he would always had to look up to. But now, the wall had collapsed. With a face of joy and excitement, Jogul grabbed his sword. At that moment, next! A shrill voice pierced his ears. Let's not look back. Never look back. It was obvious what kind of expressions his Sahyungs were looking at him with. He couldn't turn back and give them gaps to yell at him. So swordsman-like. Look at him pretending to be cool. Look at him. He really needs a good beating. Wasn't this refreshing? It was so warm that sweat was dripping down his back. I shouldn't make eye contact for a while. If he did meet their eyes. Next! He wasn't too bothered with the others, but there was one person he couldn't even glance at during this time. Jogul, who was a bit embarrassed, coughed and raised his sword. Is there no one next? Rather than Tangjan, Chung Myung, who was there, furiously shouted, How dare you! As Chung Myung was about to step ahead, a hand encased in a green leather glove blocked his way. Hyung! Tangjan looked at him with cold eyes and said, Stand back. But he is too arrogant. He isn't your opponent. Chung Myung's eyes widened. It wasn't because he didn't know what the words from Tangjan's mouth meant. Chung Myung's gaze shifted from Tangjan and he looked at Tang Ho lying on the ground. There wasn't much difference between him and Tang Ho, and if Tang Ho was beaten so easily, it would probably be the same for him as well. Furthermore, Tangjan's words affirmed that it was by no fluke that Jogul could defeat Tang Ho. Chung Myung, who bit his lip, walked into the arena without another word, and Tangjan didn't stop him. He went and picked up his fallen sibling and went back to his spot. Stay far away. Yes. Even if he didn't acknowledge Jogul's skills, he couldn't disobey the orders of his Hyung. And even if they were siblings, the position of Tangjan was different. Tangjan took his eyes off Chung Myung and looked at Jogul and the people of Mount Hua who were behind him with a relaxed expression. My younger brother made a mistake, but I am different from him. So be careful. It was a short conversation with cold words, but hearing him say that filled Jogul's body with strength. Before his mind could understand it, his body had grasped the strength of Tangjan. Is he better than the second-class disciple of Wudang? He had already tried fighting with the second-class disciples of Wudang and had even won against them without much difficulty. However, Tangjan seemed to be a level higher than them. Well, it was impossible to compare the direct lineage of a family such as the Tang family to a sect like Wudang, which trained multiple people at once. To face Tangjan, the sword dragon would have to come out in person. The sword dragon. If it was Jogul who had dealt with the sword dragon that Baekchun had faced then, how strong would it have become? Jogul's heart fluttered in excitement, and at that moment, ugh, look at him, look at him shrugging. He must want a beating. That dokebi-like bastard. The irritated voice of Chung Myung entered his ears. I've said repeatedly not to get so excited in front of others, but why does it still happen? Is his ears made of stone or something that the words just don't stick? Stab. Chung Myung's words stabbed Jogul in the back. I've told you several times that the person who gets excited the most on the battlefield is the first one to die. Why don't you listen at all? Are you doing this because you really want to die?